As the war rages on between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, here in the U.S., the conflict also has become a flashpoint. Large protests have become common occurrences in cities across the country, most recently shutting down train stations and airports over the holiday weekend. And there has also been a rise in both anti-Semitic and Islamic-phobic incidents. Joining me to talk about how we can find some common ground is Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, Senior Minister at the Middle Collegiate Church, and the author of Fierce Love, A Bold Path to Ferocious Courage and a Rule-Breaking Kindness that can help heal the world. Rabbi Bara Elman, who teaches courses on Judaism and theology at Fordham University, and Dr. Hussein Rashid, academic speaker and educator. Welcome to all of you. I was really looking forward to this conversation. Reverend Dr. Lewis, you were on this program with Dr. Rashid back in October when the war in Gaza first began. Has any of your views or your advice to congregants changed since then?
Thank you for having us. No, I would say actually my grief, as I think the world has increased, has sharpened. It's catastrophic. I don't think any of us expected this conflict and this violence to last this long. So I'm more doubled down, if you will, on my call as a Christian clergy to peace, especially in this time. It's our holy days. We just finished Hanukkah. We celebrate the birth of a Jewish baby born to poor parents, born in Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth. My people call him a Jewish Palestinian baby who grew up to teach us to love our neighbor as ourselves. It is crushing to the bone to see in this holy time so many dead bodies, all of the dead children, all of the grieving parents, the hostages still in captivity. I cry every day, and I cry the same cry. Please, God, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with us.
Rabbi, what advice do you give members of your faith community who may be feeling just overwhelmed by all of this? This news is coming from overseas, many of whom may have relatives and friends. And how are they dealing with that tension here at home?
It's, first of all, very difficult to say something about the community as a whole. The Jewish community right now is really in trauma and suffering, I think, in part because there are those, and I would include myself among them, who cannot support this war, who are pleading for a ceasefire, who know that there's no way that a military solution to the conflict and the tensions between Palestinians and Israelis in this land that they both are on and are not leaving another way has to be found. Unfortunately, a lot of the Jewish institutional community is wholeheartedly supporting Israel and believes that it is actually incumbent upon all of us to do so. And then there, as I said, those of us who are resisting that. As Reverend Jackie said, I mean, this is one of the most heartbreaking moments in my memory in terms of this kind of situation. The casualties, over 8,000 children and over 20,000 individuals who have been killed in massive indiscriminate bombing. And, we also can't forget that Israelis are traumatized by what was a vicious and obscene attack on people in the southwestern part of Israel. I don't think that what happened on October 7th has to be brought up every single time, because while it was horrible and unforgivable, we are now dealing with another case which is also horrible and unforgivable and must end. And so I'm committed to that. I'm a member of Rabbis for Ceasefire, and I am determined to do everything I can possibly to end this bloodshed and begin a conversation that allows Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Muslims and Christians to live together. I mean, we have so much more in common than we have that divides us. And it's.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an excellent point. Dr. Rashid, you, the Reverend, and Rabbi Elman are members of different religions, but you have some things in common. You find that connection. When it comes to your views on humanity and loving our fellow man, that's the thing that kind of brings it all together. What would you say bridges that gaps between all of you. How does that work given the tensions that each faith tradition is confronting right now?
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that question. And I think you've outlined really what is driving my work right now and the work of the communities in which I belong in, which is you cannot talk about love until you have justice. There is no love, there is no possibility of love without justice. And what's bringing together my community, yes, I do tend mostly to Muslim communities. This is a question of injustice. This is a question of oppression. And as my colleagues, Reverend Jackie and Rabbi Elman have said, is that all our communities are hurting. And I find I'm working more and more with people who are committed to justice across questions of religion or no religion, right? This is not a religious conflict. I've said this before, I will continue to say this. The more we frame this as a religious conflict, the less likely we are to find a solution. This is a political conflict that needs a political solution because we cannot erase Palestinian Christians, we cannot erase Palestinian atheists, we cannot erase Palestinian Jews by crafting this as an Israeli-Palestinian, as a Jewish-Muslim conflict. This is a question of politics that we need to strive towards. And I think the thing that's hurting my communities the most is that when we look for agency, whether it's to repair the world, whether it's to do good in the world, to fight for that justice, is that as citizens of the United States, we turn to our government to listen to our demands. And most members of the U.S. population are calling for a ceasefire, and our government doesn't wish to listen. And I think we have to push harder, and we have to ask questions why it's okay for us to support a genocide in every part of the world. We're not opposing the genocide against the Uyghurs. We're not opposing the genocide against the Palestinians, but we're committed to opposing occupation of Ukraine. And we cannot help but ask, is there a racial component to all of this as well that President Biden will not speak to?
Reverend Lewis, there have been a number of stories written about a generational divide when it comes to how young people are approaching and viewing this war versus older generations, a divide that's more political than it is religious. Is this something that you've noticed among the young people in your congregation, and how do you begin to approach that divide?
Yes, there is a generational divide about how we understand this. Two different kinds of ways I'm noticing. One is young people, period, are no BS, excuse my colloquialism. They're very straightforward. They want to hear the truth. They want to speak the truth. In some ways, I've been wanting young people to be nuanced in their analysis about this situation. In other words, I don't want young people to enact the injustices upon each other that they're decrying in the rest of the world. I'm with them decrying this occupation is what it is. I'm with them decrying the ongoing oppression of Palestinian peoples. As my colleague, Dr. Rashid is saying, they are not a monolith. They are very diverse. They're Baha'i, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheists in Palestine. So the young people see the oppression, call it out for what it is, and I'm very proud of that. What I want to encourage them to do is to continue to be in dialogue with one another, to not sort of to not oppress one another in the ways that they engage on campuses, for example. But I want to make sure that I'm not saying to say that this is an occupation, that's not anti-Semitic. To say that this is an outrageous amount of violence, that's not anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. But we can get on a slippery slope sometimes in our conversations, and I'm encouraging all of us from every generation to take care how we have these debates. One quick more thing to say. Older people like me, we are the ones who have the power to demand something different from our government. We have the power to enact policies and practices that demand something different from our government. Fear is causing too many of us to stay silent, and that we are spending so much money to obliterate Palestine, to obliterate Gaza, because we don't want to be honest about the catastrophe there. That's something that old folks like me need to do better about, calling for justice.
Rabbi, I have just a little bit of time left, so if you could, and this is a hard question to ask it with a short answer, how do you begin to approach those instances of anti-Semitism that have really become increasingly more common since the war began?
Well, first of all, I want to challenge that notion. I think that the amount of anti-Semitism in terms of violence is not as great as people are saying. I think there's a kind of a feedback loop that's making that fear spiral. But it is true. There is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is one of those deep biases and hatreds that is very, very difficult to unpack. I would say that, since 2015, I have been very much connected in strong intersectional groups of people who are really trying to see how all of our oppressions, our marginalizations are related to one another. And I feel like we spent 7-8 years building the relationships that we need for this moment. This is the moment we were preparing for when we started to really work together and say and think of ourselves as connected. So I don't discount the anti-Semitism. I don't discount the Islamophobia that's been enacted. I think that they are both consequences of a society that is very uncomfortable with recognizing both marginality and also intersection. And I think that it's on us as elders, I'll put myself in that category with Jackie, to do everything, to take all that knowledge and use it and work together. We must work together. We must see each other as sister and brother, and know that, to put it in colloquial language of intersectionality, all of our freedoms are bound up in each other's freedom.
Amen to that.